Please welcome Sandy Nasseri, our visionary founder and CEO of Melrose Inc. As a dynamic tech leader, Sandy built Melrose Inc. from its early days in 2003 into an award-winning technology solution provider servicing government, defense, and aerospace sectors. She brings innovation and problem solving to every challenge. She's led our team on numerous projects working with the Pentagon, NASA, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, Vast Space, and Jet Propulsion Labs, just to name a few. Today, she moderates this exciting panel celebrating Melrose Inc., officially becoming a member of the California Space Cluster, Space Return.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this lovely cloudy day. You can still see the Hollywood sign. So before I introduce our panelists, today is really a special day. Melrose Inc. will officially be signing and joining the California Space Cluster, Space Return.
Yeah!
We will be signing the Memorandum of Understanding right after the conclusion of this session. We'll do it right there. And I'm excited to introduce our esteemed panelists who will be discussing how Space Return is changing the aerospace industry. So, my first guest, Diego Padilla, as Executive Vice President of ACAR Inc., co-founder and director of Space Return, he has spearheaded a transformative partnership with NASA, ESA, and the UK Space Agency, and is driving the development and growth of Space Return, North America's first advanced manufacturing space cluster. Diego will share his expertise and the insights of how small businesses and leaders like us collaborate across industries can unlock breathtaking advancements and shape the future of space. Our lovely second guest is Dr. David G. Smith. Dr. G. Smith, PhD. Your pilot name is Jester. Serves as the CEO and General Manager of Mojave Air and Spaceport, a world-renowned hub for cutting-edge light testing and commercial spaceflight operations. You are a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and master instructor and navigator with over 3,000 flights on the B-52 aircraft. Thank you for your service. He also served as the Brigadier General of the 163rd Reconnaissance, if I'm pronouncing it right, Wing Support Unit of the California Air National Guard. His distinguished career spans advanced aeronautics research, military leadership, and now industry innovation, making him a compelling voice of the future of aerospace. Dr. Smith, thank you for joining us
so much.
today. Okay, Diego, this is very exciting for you.
Right, yes.
I want you to tell us a little bit about Space Return and the idea of uniting small businesses, a group like us, to pursue aerospace opportunities. Why now? Why is it important now?
Well, it was really, really interesting because the story really kind of started when my mother acquired the company that she had been working for almost 40 years in 2017. And I was hired as the vice president of the company. And I immediately thought, I want to work with the best. Like, that's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to get better. That's how you're going to challenge yourself. And so I thought, who's the best in the industry? NASA. So I started calling them. Almost the first day, probably my first phone call was to NASA. And I tell the story that I think their voicemail was broken for about 7 years, but they fixed it. And a couple of years ago, they actually called us back. So I'm so glad that they got that voicemail fixed. And so they called us, and we went to a meeting with the Small Business Alliance in Marshall Spacefield in Huntsville, Alabama. And they presented us with a tiny little contract valued at approximately $350 million, set aside for small businesses. And they said, how come no small business is bidding on this? And I'm like, well, because it's really big. It's huge. It's daunting, right? So our question, but I'm the kind of person that doesn't see the problem that much. I just kind of assume there's problems anyway. So I'm just thinking like right? I'm just thinking how are we going to do this? That I kind of don't look at it because I think when the challenge comes, the solution comes right behind it. Or sometimes you already have the solution and the challenge hasn't come yet. So So then I thought, well, when we travel for our company around the world, whether it's the Paris Air Show or Farnborough or FAMEX or Southeast Asia with the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, one of our founding members, we see that there's clusters. And one of the countries that has amazing clusters is actually Taiwan. They make clusters like crazy for everything. Whether, and the clothing cluster is next to the space cluster because they link the technology. So I just said, why don't we have a cluster? And so there wasn't one. So we actually said, well, that's the first step. Let's form the first North American space cluster. And so we just did that. And that was because we thought the only way for us to be able to address these contracts is for us to share our capability and capacity so that we could actually bid on these contracts rather than waiting till I get big enough to bid on this contract, which can take decades, right? I'm just going to get a bunch of really talented people that I look up to that are all here that I'm going to learn from and invite them to work together on these contracts. So that's in very, very general. Yeah.
Dr. Smith, what are some of the challenges facing the current aerospace landscape that can be addressed today, but by this collaboration of space return? What do you see happening out there?
So I would offer that the motto I have at Mojave is something I think this cluster needs to embrace. My motto is 2 words: permission granted. We're going to figure out how to get it done, right? And where that comes from, it's just a dream of a child a long time ago in Hawaii. A service brat's kid, 5 years old, in the early 60s. Dad subscribed to the National Geographic, and I would voraciously get that magazine every time it came in because I was reading about people in Southern California that were flying higher and faster than anybody had anywhere on the face of the earth out of this place called the Mojave Desert. People like Crossfield, Knight, flying the X-15. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, that could be a dream of mine in the future. And by an accident of fate, over time, sure enough, I got a request to come to Edwards Air Force Base, go to test pilot school, and touch some of the same dirt that maybe people like Armstrong touched. And being a part of that mission, that test mission, is always pushing the envelope, pushing reality. That is what I believe we have to do with space in the United States today. We have to push the envelope. We have to push reality. If you believe the data from the Space Mobility Conference recently, about 10 years ago, round numbers, we had about 10 launches a year in the United States. 10. And that was big business. This year we're going to do 200.
It was mostly NASA also.
Right. Right. This year we'll do 200. We're projected to do 400 in 2027. We simply have to have the national capacity to do that. And right now we don't. So I believe what the answer to that question is, it doesn't rest with NASA, because NASA and the United States Air Force have an interesting commonality. And that is that neither one of us has ever produced an aircraft. We contract with people to produce aircraft. We work with Northrop, Lockheed, Boeing, United Launch Alliance, SpaceX, whoever it is. But we have to use that unbridled energy, drive, determination, and focus that comes from free enterprise in the United States. And the only way we can empower that fully is places like Mojave that say, hey, you know what? Permission's granted.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Diego, this is something you really like. So there is a NASA Marshall's $3 billion procurement, currently open window for lunar infrastructure and mobility system. Right? Can you tell us how Space Return is approaching this opportunity? Was there a good place for us or a good place for Mojave? Like, what is your vision about this massive bill
Right.
that's coming out?
Right, absolutely. So yeah, so just to kind of echo some of what you just said right now, David. So we are here to prepare for the future. That's why we're all here. That's why all of us are here right now, right? And it might sound a little cheesy, but the future is here right now, right? The requirements are already here, right? And we're not able to keep up with the requirements, right? And so that's really why we're here, and that's why NASA, over the past 2 years and 4 meetings plus that we've had with them, started with that small $360 million contract, and then showed us a $580 million contract, and then a little $1.9 billion contract, which equals $3.2 billion. And they said, why aren't you guys bidding on this? And so we're like, well, we're going to, right? And so that really was the motivator to us. And almost immediately, our CEO, Teresa, was able to just dedicate enough resources for me to delegate my responsibilities to the rest of the team and just focus on the cluster. And that's what we've been doing. So what are we doing to prepare? And I want to throw out some numbers. I have some notes right here that I just didn't want to forget. The size of the space industry right now is currently valued at $450 billion, which is larger than the aerospace industry. The difference between the space industry and the aerospace industry is that the aerospace industry is commodified. We've done it for 100 years at least. We've been in aerospace for 100 years. So we figured out how to make things quickly, cheaply, and it's kind of headed in the direction of like the automotive industry, right? So cars get better and less expensive, even if it doesn't seem like it right now. But that's what's going on with the aerospace industry. The space industry right now really needs a lot of innovation, really needs a lot of ideas, and so it's a more exciting kind of industry. Not only that, but it's tied into something that Melrose does, which is software and data as service, which is an industry that's valued at $700 billion right now. And that one also doesn't have enough people participating in it. So between the space industry and software and data as service, we're talking of over already $1.3 trillion in valuation right now. Right now. The space industry is expected to reach a $1 trillion valuation, which you know, Morgan Stanley by 2030. I think it's going to get there much more quickly. And so we're talking about these really astronomical numbers. Another astronomical number is that by 2030, there's going to be approximately $450 billion worth of unrealized projects in the US.
So tell them what is unrealized project.
It means they don't get done.
Yep.
It means they're just sitting there, right? So it means they're just sitting there because either nobody bid on it or nobody thinks they can do it. You know, basically they're just sitting there. And this is unrealized potential that really addresses the three pillars of space return. The number one really important thing that we believe in is economic development. I refer people to the book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling did a test with 3 monkeys and 3 humans, if you know, and asked them the same questions, the monkeys and the humans. But the monkeys had to answer by throwing bananas in a basket. Guess who got more answers right when they were asked the questions? It's who you think it is. It was the monkeys. Because what was happening is that random answers would likely land you with better scores than if you actually presented what your perception was, right? And so that's why humans were getting less answers right than monkeys throwing a banana. And so what he started to do is then focus on interpreting data and focusing on data, and I think that's something that we all need to look at, right? The media shapes a lot of what we think. The media shapes a lot of, people take the media as fact, and it isn't, it's entertainment. And it needs to be seen that way. And so once you start looking at the data, the world completely changes, right? And that's when you're like, oh, we can do this. We can do this. Because I've been looking at it in a totally distorted lens that doesn't match reality, right? And then the other one is inclusive economies. I would like to refer people to the book, Why Nations Fail, okay? Where they did a study of border towns. So they did in Arizona, border town Nogales, half is in the US, half is in Mexico. The US side doing way better than the Mexican side. What happened? Well, the two countries up until recently, had very different economic policies. The US policy was an inclusive economy of creating a middle class. The Mexican policy was an extractive economy of creating a very rich class and a very poor class, which is changing over there. And here it's kind of going in a different way, right? So the cluster works under an inclusive economic model, meaning that we share the IP, we share the resources of the cluster with all of the participants.
All over the world.
All over the world, because that's the only way we're gonna get these things done, right? And finally, and I know this is really with everything that's going on, especially in Los Angeles and California, political engagement is not an option.
Yeah.
When you're in the space industry, when you are in the aerospace industry, you must be politically engaged. I'm not talking about ideologics here, I'm talking about politics. And that is because our industry is very heavily regulated.
Yes.
So when you don't participate, or when your participation is based on media perception versus data, it really impacts our industry and it impacts people's lives in a way that doesn't have to be like that. So these are the three things that the cluster is doing. We're also what we call a technological cluster, an enabling organization. What do we enable? We enable our members to make amazing technology, what they call in Singapore deep tech, right? And that is just so exciting that you end up like not really even noticing the challenge anymore. You just know you have to run your hardest, right? And so how are we approaching that very, very pragmatically? Well, we're helping to promote upskilling, we're creating mentor protege programs, and we are attempting to attract investment because resources are needed. And one of the really important things that we do, the cluster already has full compliance, which is a challenge for a lot of small businesses.
Right.
AS 9100, CMMC 2.0, and ITAR are very expensive programs to keep. The cluster infrastructure already has that. So when our members work within our infrastructure, and part of the infrastructure that we're going to develop with the amazing Melrose Inc., you're already compliant to those security measures. And so that eliminates a hurdle that isn't really that big, but that stops a lot of small businesses from participating.
Yeah, because it's not just the money, it's also having those certificates and capabilities.
Right, and managing them, right?
Right.
Because the certificate means that now you have a management of them, meaning that there's full traceability, full transparency. And you know, I used to work, my background is actually in advertising, which is so weird that I'm here, right? I used to work in the CNN building somewhere around here, right over there, right? I used to work on the 7th floor. I made movie posters for a living, right? So I made the movie, Big Fish movie poster, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, The Italian Job. And you know, I was like, I was there and I would get really annoyed when people would say, can you make it purple? And I'd be like, no, it's orange. I can't make it purple. So I quickly found myself out of the industry because because I wouldn't make it purple. That wasn't the brand philosophy. Why would you do make it purple? And so with engineers, I really enjoy working because there isn't that, right? It's like you're bound to physics. And nobody can say, well, I don't believe in gravity. Right. Right? It's like, well, I don't believe in safety. Well, yeah, you do now, you know. And in space, the space is a very harsh environment, a very hostile environment to humans. We cannot survive out there. We can barely survive on this earth, right? We cannot survive out there. So if you have one person that isn't aligned to the data, to the scientific data, to the knowledge that we have from people that have the actual experience and they just want to open the hatch, no. And right now, people here are opening the hatch, right? And when they're not supposed to. And so that's really, I think, what I really, really enjoy about the space industry. It really gave me this framework that I really couldn't argue with. You can't argue with gravity. I mean, some people have tried, but you can't. And I think that's what I find really exciting about it. So there's a lot of pragmatic things, there's ideological things, but we are here to prepare for the future. We are here to eliminate innovation stagnation. It's over, it's done. We are here, that's why we're here.
Beautiful, thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Smith, given your expertise in the U.S. Air Force and as the CEO of the Mojave Air and Spaceport, What are the kind of technologies that you believe will become critical players in the next years of aerospace development?
So what a great question. Yeah, I don't know. Sure. I don't, but I have some ideas of where the answers lie. And, Diego brought up a couple of these little experiments that have been done in the past. One of my favorites is sometimes called the Marshmallow Tower, where a group of kindergartners, a group of engineers, and a group of attorneys were given the task of building a tower that will support a marshmallow. And the kindergartners invariably won, always, because they played. They had fun, they collaborated, they worked together, a cluster of kindergartners that figured out how to do something successful. Who always lost? The engineers. The people that had the inherent skill to do this could never agree. They worked on the plan, and then they came up with another plan, and then they modified their plan, and at the end of the working block of time, they had yet to start construction of their tower, but they had a plan, right? The attorneys, interestingly, fell kind of in the middle because love them or hate them, they live in a world where they are forced to come to collaboration. And they would learn how to collaborate to get something done. And it would work. But those kindergartners that had fun, that's what we need to inspire. That's where the answer is. It's pushing the envelope and having fun. And the place to do it is right here. And here's why. It's a bit of a mantra for me, but I like to say that Kitty Hawk is interesting, but it's also totally insignificant to aerospace. The Wright Flyer did not cover the distance of the wingspan of my B-52. But we look at that as the salient landmark event in aerospace, and it's just not. What is Southern California. That's where aerospace grew, developed, became dynamic. That's where the brain power is to do these things. That's where the capital investment is. And that's where people did some things that were a little out of the box. You talked about collaboration. During the Second World War in the early 1940s in Southern California, Bill Boeing got together with all the other aerospace giants and threw his plans on the table. All these proprietary classified plans that are going to make Boeing wealthy, he exposed to everyone on the hopes that they would do the same thing, and they did. As he approached them, it's said that he loosely said, folks, we can lose this war. We have got to learn how to work together to get this done. And if we don't, we're doomed to fail. So that's the future of aerospace, is collaboration, growing from a nest in Southern California that Mojave's very, very excited to be a part of. When I look at some of the things the startups that come to Mojave want to bring, want to deliver, want to enhance in the industry, it stuns me, because these are ideas that just a few years ago, me, who likes innovation, would have said you're daft. You know, you were got to get a new pharmacy because the drugs you're taking just ain't working for me, you know? But the reality is today they're doing it, right? And they're doing it with remarkable results and innovative answers. If we're going to go to 400 launches a year in 2 years, we have got to have the private enterprise step into that. NASA doesn't have the money. SpaceX doesn't have the throughput and capacity. ULA has systems that are largely atrophying now. We've got to rely upon these new companies like VAST, like Astrobotics, that are willing to push the envelope and say, hey, maybe the access to space isn't a multi-stage gigantic rocket with 200 satellites on it. Maybe it's a single stage to low Earth orbit with one satellite on it, maybe. And these creative people coming up with creative answers, that is tomorrow's technology. And when I look at empowering that on the side of the envelope that I am now versus where I was. My last DoD position, I was the director of a place called Plant 42. And if you don't know about Plant 42, that's kind of okay. They do a lot of secret work. They do a lot of public work. All the nation's B-21s are built at Plant 42. All our F-35s, the mid-body structure is done at Plant 42. It's an amazing place. It's terribly slow. It's terribly cumbersome. There's a program going on at Plant 42 right now between Lockheed Martin and NASA called X-59 Low Boom Demonstrator, trying to make a supersonic airplane that won't have a big sonic boom so we can fly it over land as an airliner. That program's been in development out there for 4 years and it's yet to fly. Boom Supersonic, my TITAC by the way, came to Mojave Air and Spaceport about a year ago, built their scaled model of the supersonic airliner they intend to build, flew it, 3 months later, flew it supersonic, accomplished all their testing points, closed the program, and their airliner's under construction. Private enterprise is the answer, not government control. And a cluster like this can make that happen. So to go back to the core question, I really don't know.
Well, it's also because the government is highly regulated. You know, they cannot blow 50 launches. They can't. They may have the funds, but it's like you have to, you know, listen to the EPA, and are you causing damage, and is there environmental, like there's all these things that you have to abide by. So they can't move fast.
So I loved my experience with the government. I really did. I'm serious. Loved it. But there's a new spark, a new catalyst going on that I have the freedom to run fast with scissors, not do things blatantly unsafe, but be willing to address a much wider envelope than the government is willing to address. And you're right, the control in the government and the very limited funding will create stymies and roadblocks to success that we have to figure out how to get around. There's an interesting quandary that I experienced on the government side of my service, and that's that here you have a highly restricted budget on a program. So what you do is restrict the program by the budget rather than resource the program to be efficient. And when you constrict the program by budgetary authority, you stretch out the time. And then you can't figure out why I just took my critical chain and I doubled it and I can't seem to meet budget. We don't understand that making things slower and more cumbersome is not fiscally savvy. We have to be creative, and I think a cluster like this could very well be the answer to that question.
Agreed. Well, I have another question, but I'm going to twist it a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about this threat from China from 2027, because I don't know that everybody's aware of it. Suzette and I get to go to a lot of government shows, and they always talk about the threat from China, the threat from China. You know, and I feel like we're not ready, and I feel that maybe small businesses can help that problem, or for us to move faster. Can you maybe specify a little bit about what is the threat?
So, in the late 30s, General Billy Mitchell predicted that there would be an attack at Pearl Harbor from Japan. He said it would be a Sunday morning at 7:30. He didn't do that by happenstance. He did it by studying tides, conditions, status of shipbuilding, status of the carrier fleet. When would the vulnerabilities be for the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor? When would the majority of ships be in port? 7:30 on a Sunday morning. Billy Mitchell missed by 18 minutes. The attack was 7:48 on a Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. We court-martialed Billy Mitchell because he spoke heresy. The United States is vulnerable to Japan? What are you talking about? Now, what if that message of attacking Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941 at 7:30 in the morning, came from Hirohito? What if it came from Yamamoto, the commander of all the Japanese naval forces. Maybe we would have listened if we heard it from them. So what have we been given? The chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, and I feel I must say this, I have absolutely zero issue with the remarkable legacy, prestige, and the people that make up China. Remarkably driven, wonderful human beings. I do have a beef with the Chinese Communist Party. Okay. The chairman of that party has stated that in 2027, China will be whole with Taiwan. I don't know what that's going to look like if that happens. I don't know what it's going to look like if we experience December 7th, 1941 again with Taiwan. I do believe, and I put on my military hat here, that the answer to this question may not be armed conflict. The answer should be deterrence. The strength that we can maintain in advance so that China is forced to take a step back and rethink this philosophy, because the idea of a kinetic or a non-kinetic conflict with Taiwan and its ally, the United States of America, is unthinkable. The way we can do that is by inspiring this innovative business case. Business can provide answers in 2 years that DoD can think about dealing with in 2 years. So the answer has always been the innovative spirit of the American people, being willing to do creative things. The business drive behind it and the brilliance of engineers, and I don't want to fault engineers, but I do know that, you know how you found an extroverted engineer? They're looking at your shoes when you're talking, you know, so but the brilliance that we bring collectively through free enterprise stymies anything we can do inside the Department of Defense.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.